Hello, Honors U.S. History students. Today we have our notes on the 1950s and the 1960s, what's happening culturally and politically at the time. Some things that you might see that are missing in this are going to be things with civil rights, and that's because we're going to do all the civil rights stuff all at one time, right? Even though we have in the 1950s, the Montgomery bus boycott is going to be going on, and then in the 60s, obviously, there is a lot of stuff going on. But again, we're going to do that separately. But do keep that in the back of your head that that is happening at this time as well. Now remember, we already saw the Cold War that was happening, and that was the 50s and 60s, right, and the very, very early 70s when the Vietnam War ended. But remember, with all of this time period, we're going to see a lot of consumerism, people trying to buy lots of things, like this beautiful house here, but then also people are afraid of communism and the possibility of nuclear war. So it's a very odd time period. Right, so let's get started. Right, so here we are going to have this video here. It's going to be below in the description, so I encourage you to pause this video right here, go down, right click on that video to open it in a new window so you can watch it, and then come back to our video here. But we're going to have a lot of videos today. In class we would normally watch these all together and discuss them, but obviously it's a little harder to do here. But again, this video link is going to be on here, and the things we want you to look at are characteristics of the 50s. This is actually going to be a link to a ad for a new Ford car at the time, but it's going to be a little weird because it is from the 1950s. But definitely take a moment, pause this right now, and then right click on the link that is in that description right below, right down here. Okay, right. Some of the things you might see, some references to this in that commercial that you just watched, but you might not see all of these. You're going to see some other things as well. Again, the ads at that time period are actually kind of funny because of just the way that they were made. But remember, this is the time period after World War II, right? We're spending a lot of money, right? And our income for our families, if we look at our chart down here, is going up, 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 up. So a lot of times when people try to think of like, oh, when was the United States the best it ever was? A lot of people think of the best as in the economy, and that's going to be in the 1950s and early 1960s. The economy was really, really good in the United States. Now, obviously, was the economy good for everyone? No. Okay. However, for the majority of Americans, it was much, much better. Think about it, that they had thought about before the 1940s. That's going to be World War II, and before that was the Great Depression. So it's kind of showing us that all that stuff we did to stimulate the economy to end the Depression has finally paid off, but it just took 2 decades, right? So again, the economy is booming. We have the highest standard of living in the world. You could definitely say the 1920s and 1950s are very similar during this time period, right? Because of all that increased buying capacity. So here again, we have this idea that the 50s and 20s are the same, right? When it comes to consumerism, all right? In consumerism, we are the consumers. We're buying lots of things. So here's just a plethora of pictures of things that we could now buy in the 50s, everything from Tupperware, Burger King burgers, Kentucky Fried Chicken, new televisions. Now remember, these old TVs were like a piece of furniture. And we also have cars. Now, we had cars before, but now they're actually like, we have a variety of cars to pick from. It's not just the Model T, so things are expanding. Okay. Now, another thing to kind of add on to this that's going to be how we can expand everything is we have this new thing called the GI Bill. So definitely mode a pause right now and make sure you have out your packet, so have that like a split screen, if you will. You can fill in the definition for the GI Bill, right? And so this is what nowadays, when a lot of people leave high school and they decide they're going to join the military, one of the major reasons that people do that is because they can pay for college. That's because of the GI Bill, right? So the GI Bill is going to give people money so they can go to school, right? But also it's going to allow you to have loans for homes and businesses and things like that. So a lot of these people that came back from fighting World War II are going to use that money to either go to college, where they never had the opportunity or the idea of going to college before because it was really financially out of their grasp, or they had that money so they could start a business, buy a home, things like that. So there's a lot of things going on with this. It's a really good thing. Again, the GI Bill we still have today, and a lot of students use that to help them pay for college and to join the military after high school. Okay, now here's some stuff you probably have heard of a little bit before, right? So the baby boom is anyone who was born from 1946 to 1964. So this is the time period right after the Second World War. So if we look at our chart here that's down at the bottom in green, right? This is our birth rate per 1,000 people in the United States. Now, it started off really, really high, and this is way back in the 1860s. That's the Civil War time period. Unfortunately, we have a large infant mortality rate back then, right? Because children, you could die in childbirth, right? So the mother and child could die. There might have been children who did not survive childbirth or survived infancy, right? Think about all the diseases and things like that that we had back in that time period. So that's why this is going down, right? Okay, because things are going to be getting better medically, right? So we're going to be able to save those babies. We're going to have vaccines for things. We're going to know what cholera, how to prevent cholera and stuff like that, right? Then we go down here and it's really, really low in the late 30s. Think Great Depression. People are going to try to avoid having children because they can't take care of themselves, right? So here's our big bump, right? This is the baby boom, right? So again, 40s to 60s, right? A large increase in people being born. Right? Now, with all of those people that are going to be having kids, we need to have new places to live. So we're going to create these new suburbs. These are modern suburbs like you guys might be living in right now, right? And our very first suburb was called Levittown, and it is going to be in Long Island, New York. Right? Again, take a pause right now, all right, and click on the video that is in the link below that's called Levittown, right? And this is going to have a video from that time period of them building these houses and telling you how much the houses cost. You're going to be shocked, right? How much the houses cost then, right? And then ways that they made them cheaper. So when you are watching this video, I would highly recommend that you kind of look around your own house. What are some of the ways that they made these houses in a cheaper fashion that people could actually afford them that you're seeing in your house, right? One of the keys on this is sharing plumbing. So look in your house. Is there a wall between a bathroom and the kitchen? That could also be a ceiling between the bathroom and kitchen, right? Think about where things are located. If they're close by, they're going to share that plumbing. That means less expense, and they talk about that sort of in this video here. So again, take a pause, all right? Okay, right click on that video down below, all right, and think about that stuff while before we move on to the next topic, okay? All right, we also need a way to get to those city jobs, all right, but still live in the suburbs. So we're going to create the Interstate Highway Act. This is with President Eisenhower, right? And we're going to be creating these highways all across the country. So this highway system is actually going to be called the Interstate Highway System, or Eisenhower Interstate Highway System, right? And so that would be places like 75 and 85. Those are these blue highways and part of the interstate highway system, right? So interstate means between states. Right? Now we can go from place to place much, much quicker, right? And we kind of become this car culture, all right? And we think of like the Great American Road Trip and stuff like that. So like think of Route 75. It starts way up in Michigan, actually at the Michigan-Canadian border, and goes all the way down to Miami, right? So again, we're crossing the entire United States here. Right? So this is a good idea, right? We're also going to see our culture changing with television, right? So television at this time period, right? Remember, it's black and white. Eventually, it will turn into color in the 60s, but we start off in black and white, and everybody would watch certain shows. You didn't have a ton of channels. You had like your basic 3 channels, like CBS, NBC, ABC. That's it. Right? And so you'd have these classic shows that everyone would watch, and some of these are the classics from that time period. I'm sure a lot of these you can find on YouTube, find all over different streaming services and stuff like that. Some of them are really good. Like I always loved Lucy, right, when I was a kid. But these other ones, like some people would watch them. I remember watching Bonanza, but it was like, it was still kind of old, right? But it's, if you're into westerns and stuff like that, right? So with this idea is that we're modeling society values with these shows. So if you had any issues in one of the shows, they could be solved in 30 minutes, right? Your family was always there to save you. So like with Bonanza, all right, these are 3 brothers and their dad, all right, and you would save each other and stuff like that. Leave It to Beaver is about like this perfect family, where again, your biggest problem was that the dog ate your homework. So very idealistic, didn't really show what American families really were like. It was more of what you wanted your family to look like. It's not until we get to the 70s and 80s when we start seeing TV shows that are a bit more realistic with actual problems that we actually face on a day-to-day type of thing. But again, very idealistic models of society, right? We're also going to see television being influenced by politics. Big surprise. Whenever we've had, since the start of TV, we've had politics being part of TV. Now, if you were in English class, some of this stuff, American Lit, will be very familiar, right? Okay, this idea of the Crucible. So if you've read The Crucible from English class, maybe you watched the movie The Crucible, right? Some of this stuff might be like, oh yeah, we talked about this, okay? All right, so this guy, Senator Joseph McCarthy, right? Again, he's in your guys' terms list and stuff for your packet. He is this guy right here. He claimed on television that he had a secret list of all of the known communists that were in the State Department, people who were like spies in our government. A lot of people that were targeted by this, government employees, Hollywood entertainers, teachers, right, union activists, right? So the reason that these people are all going to be here is because people were scared that these are the people influencing America and influencing America's youth. So if a Hollywood entertainer would be a communist, right, and somebody would be watching them on TV or in the movies and really, really love them and look up to them, they could be influenced. If a teacher was teaching things that would be about communism, it could influence the youth. For example, there was actually a law at the time in the 50s that said that teachers were not allowed to teach about rebelling against your government. We totally have talked about that. I totally would have gotten in trouble. But think about the American Revolution. We talk about rebelling against the government. Kind of have to do that in U.S. history, but that was a law at the time. So there again, everybody's getting scared by all this stuff. It's called a Red Scare, Red for communism. We end up having these witch hunts and everything like that, just like in the 1920s. Okay, so we're seeing a similarity again between the 20s and the 50s. This whole thing is called McCarthyism, right? Okay, after Joseph McCarthy. And so McCarthyism is this idea where we're trying to find these quote unquote communists that are all amongst us, that are these quote unquote spies. Later on, after McCarthy had been on TV telling everyone, I have this secret list, people found out he was holding up a blank piece of paper. All of the stuff was lies. He had no list of anyone who's actually a communist in the United States government. So again, we got some weird stuff going on. So also for the end of this slide here, pause, right? And there's going to be a link, right? So you can see the link I have here. It's going to be a link down below. Go ahead and click on that to get a little bit of extra on Joseph McCarthy and what's going on with that before you move on to the next topic. Right. Now, beyond television, we also have movies at the time. Now, remember, we just said the Red Scare. Look at these two movie posters. You see a lot of what color, right? So obviously some parallels here. And so what I'm going to have in the description below is a link to the trailers for Invasion of the Body Snatchers and The Blob. They're both these old-timey sci-fi movies. They're so funny. They're supposed to be scary, but they're really, really funny. But in there, it's this idea where they're not aliens. They're really supposed to be a metaphor for communists, and this idea that we're scared of everything around us. Even the Blob is red, all right? So again, watch these two trailers here, all right, if you need a little bit of a laugh, because they are really funny. Again, I'm sure you can find the entire movie on YouTube if you wish, but they are just so funny because they're so over the top. But again, we're seeing this idea of hunting or being scared of this unknown force, quote unquote, unknown force is communism, right? And we're seeing that even in our movies at the time. Okay. Now, TV doesn't stop there. We are also going to see the presidential debates between Nixon and Kennedy in 1960 being the first ones on television. So again, we're going to have a video for that one that's going to be down below. So definitely take a pause and click on that, right? And think of ways that Nixon lost the debate or how Kennedy won the debate. I will give you one of them that's not quite in the video, but we can definitely see in this shot of the first debate. These are all in black and white. Nixon here is wearing a gray suit. He blends into the background, okay? So then the next debate, because it's going to be a series of debates, he changes up his suit so you can see him a little bit better, right? But you're going to see some other things going on in this video of what's happening between these two guys. A lot of people that listened to the debate on the radio said that Nixon won because they said he had a lot of good speaking points. He has a lot of good experience. He used to be the vice president before this. However, people watching on TV saw Kennedy and they were just impressed by how he carried himself. So these debates now change the way we vote for a president. It's now not just about ideas, it's also about how you carry yourself. Okay. And again, civil rights, we're going to have a whole different section on civil rights, putting them all together, but we're seeing them being influenced by television, right? Now, I realize some of these pictures you guys have seen before, you should have seen before, right? They're very, very famous pictures, right, from the March on Birmingham and the Children's March. But from this is that these were going to be put on television, the videos of these things, and people could see them in their living room. And so it wasn't just a story in the newspaper or something someone was talking about. They're actually seeing what's going on in the extreme violence that's happening. And so TV is going to be very influential in helping move on this, the civil rights movement to really get people involved. And again, a lot of the stuff we'll talk about when we get to the civil rights movement is the idea of empathy, right? Once somebody is empathetic of someone else's situation, they feel that they need to get involved, right? And they have, again, pulling at those heartstrings and that sort of stuff. And so television and imagery that we're going to see here, right, is really going to be powerful for that civil rights movement and really, really help it out, right? But again, we're going, this is kind of like a small snapshot here, right? We're going to talk a lot about it, have different activities with it, dealing with next week, okay? Right, so some other impacts we have from the Cold War is on technology. Right, we're going to have the space race. This is the race between the Soviets and the United States to get to space, and then once we are both in space, to get to the moon, right? We're going to be developing the hydrogen bomb, which is more powerful than the ones we used in Japan at the end of World War II, right? The links we got here is, one is the location of where we did the testing, which is at the Bikini Atoll. Little trivia for you, the bikini bathing suit is named after this, and said that the person who made it said they called it Bikini after the island where they tested the bomb because it had an atomic effect on society, because now people are wearing bikinis. So ladies, your bathing suits are a relic of the Cold War, all right? The other thing we got here is going to be a video of the testing of that bomb. So definitely something interesting to watch. Here's a clip from it. And you can see really, really small down here at the bottom are going to be ships. So it gives you an idea of size. So a bit crazy and everything there. But again, there's a link there for you guys to pause real quick and watch that. The Soviets launched the first satellite in space called Sputnik. Right? This is a picture of Sputnik. It's literally a silver ball. It's a little bit bigger than a basketball, and all it does is orbit the Earth and beep. Right? Not very sophisticated, but again, the very first thing that a human had ever put in orbit in space. Right? The United States is going to try to get more and more people into space. The Soviets actually have the first person in space, Yuri Gagarin, right? And then the Americans will have the first person to orbit the Earth, right, which is John Glenn, and then obviously Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin will be the first humans to step foot on the moon. And in order to get there, we had to make sure things were safe, so we did send monkeys, and the Soviets sent dogs and things like that into space to see if they could survive. Lots of them did not, but some of them did, because obviously we involved that technology. And a little throw out here for some modern culture, right, is that Buzz Aldrin, the other guy who was on the moon, that's where you get Buzz Lightyear's name from, right? So shout out to the Toy Story fans. Right. So obviously the moon landing is in July of 1969. Right. We got some links here. Again, those links are going to be down below. So pause this real quick and right click those before we move on. All right. So some other things we're going to get from this space race. All right. Okay. Obviously we're going to develop more stuff with computers, phones, and also air conditioning. Right. So here we got our old timey first cell phones. Right. This is our first computer. It's not this here. It's this whole room. And this old-timey computer that we had, all it could do was basically what your graphing calculator can do, right? So if somebody at these times in the 50s and 60s would see our cell phone and how much it can do, that would be like a supercomputer then that they didn't even know what it could possibly do. And we use it for silly things like TikTok. All right, so we've come a long, long way. And then air conditioning actually comes from the space race because you had to keep the shuttle cool enough so that when the astronauts came back into the Earth's atmosphere, they didn't burn up, right? And so then that we're going to use to bring down to what's the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt is the bottom part of the United States, so basically Southern California all the way over here to Georgia, right? Georgia and the Carolinas. And so more people are going to move to this area because we have air conditioning. Think about it. Would you live here if you didn't have AC? Probably not, right? It would be really rough, okay? So again, good technology we're getting from the space race, okay? It's going to be also impacting education, right? We're going to create NASA, the National Aeronautics Space Administration. So NASA, they're the ones that do all the space stuff. We should know that already. And then we're going to also have this thing called the National Defense of Education Act. We basically wanted to train students to be better than the Soviets. We wanted to beat the Soviets at this race for space and technology. So we're going to emphasize more math, more science, and foreign language in schools. So if those are not the subjects that, get you up in the morning and you don't really care for those subjects, blame the Cold War, okay? Right. Daily life, we're going to have lots of duck and cover drills to try and protect us in case a bomb does go off. Now, from this, I am going to have a link for you guys that you might have seen in another class, but that's totally okay. But for these duck and cover drills, everyone knew that if the bomb happened right there where you were, that was not going to protect you. However, it's to protect you from the shock wave, which would basically be like an earthquake that would be coming. So it's kind of like an earthquake drill, but the earthquake's caused by a bomb, right? We're going to be testing tons and tons of bombs. So we're going to see fallout shelters all over the place. We're going to see people making these shelters in their backyards. And this is also where we get the popular culture of Godzilla. All right, think about it. Godzilla is from Japan. Japan is where we dropped the bombs, World War II. All right, yada, yada, yada. Giant lizards. Okay. So here is where you might have seen a video from another class. All right, so Bert the Turtle. If you have not seen this, definitely pause real quick, right click on the link that is in the description down below, right? Bert the Turtle, it is a character that we had that basically told you to duck and cover, right? And it was kind of this mascot of teaching children what to do in case there was a bomb. And again, to try and ease our fears, we do this in cartoon form. Now, those fallout shelter signs, you can find them all over the place. Here's me in New York City, in Greenwich Village, and I found a fallout shelter sign. And so you can see how old this sign is. It's definitely from the 50s and everything like that. And so I saw it, got really excited, had to practice my duck and cover, but of course I didn't spill my coffee, right? The most important thing. All right, now we're going to go ahead and go into the 60s because these are all going to be connected here, right? So, and again, we're going to have some videos in here as well. Right, so Kennedy is going to be elected in 1960 because he won that televised debate, right? And when he wins, right, this is our electoral map here at the bottom. Kennedy is going to be the red, Nixon is the blue. They do not have the modern colors that we think of now. That happens in the year 2000, right? And so from here, you can see that it's kind of all sporadic, right? Who voted for the Democrat, who voted for the Republican. And look at our popular vote. It is very, very close, right? This was the closest election at the time, right? The closest election overall was the election of 2000, right? So we'll get to that later. But with Kennedy, he is going to be having a new kind of view on what we should do in society. So we have part of his quote from his inaugural address: "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." The reason I bring this one up is because I think it's a really good thing to kind of think about right now, is that the idea of like what we're dealing with this pandemic. Again, we haven't had a global pandemic since 1918, but it's the idea of like, what can you do, not like for necessarily your whole country, but like for your neighbors, for your family, right? And that idea of kind of like, following all the rules, doing the best things you can to help out everyone, and not just thinking of how can yourself be helped. So kind of, again, putting everybody in together, and we're all working together, right? So kind of a good phrase to kind of think back on, right? The guy was a very smart guy, right? Unfortunately, Kennedy is mostly known for dying in office, okay? So he was killed in November 22nd of 1963. Lee Harvey Oswald is the killer. We have a link here. This is to some of the files that were released recently about the assassination. But the biggest thing we want to know from this is we want to look at this image right here, right? So in this image, this is LBJ, so Lyndon Baines Johnson, his vice president. He's being sworn into office, right? Next to him is Jackie Kennedy. She's wearing this same outfit she has on in the picture right before her husband is killed. And so this is this famous picture. It's on Air Force One. They're taking Kennedy's body back to DC, and he's being sworn into office on the airplane. Right, so this is considered a giant national tragedy. It's the first modern president who was killed in office, and so it really shocks the nation. So if we would think of like different time periods, like you have the Kennedy assassination, you have September 11th, right? These are big pivotal moments. Before then, you would have Pearl Harbor, right? So these big pivotal moments that everybody in America that was around at that time remembers exactly where they were and what was going on at that particular moment in time. Okay. So for Johnson, all right, Johnson has, we talked in our stuff on Vietnam, Johnson had done some bad things with Vietnam, right? He made some bad decisions, and Vietnam was not a very popular thing, right? However, Johnson also does a lot of really good things for domestic stuff. So, like, one of them is going to be the Great Society. Okay, the Great Society is a program that was created to try and make America this great, not just a great power in the world, but great to be a place to live and take care of everyone. And so, with this, we're going to see a lot of big changes, a lot of things we still have today, right? And so the Great Society is something that I don't think a lot of people give a little as much credit to as they should, but it's something that is, there's a lot of stuff going on. So again, we got a video that's going to go along with this, but some of the things that are added in here, and this is a very small amount of the things in the Great Society, but the biggest topic issues. So you get the Civil Rights Act is in here. That's actually going to be passed in January, right after the assassination of Kennedy, right? So that is passed in Congress because Johnson goes to Congress and tells them, we need to pass this law to honor the legacy of President Kennedy, right? So you get the Voting Rights Act. We have the also the Voting Rights Act that's going to end poll taxes and Jim Crow laws in the South. So that's definitely a good thing. You can see in some of these pictures, this one on the bottom left, this is Johnson and Martin Luther King. You can definitely see kind of like the mood in that room. They're probably listening to somebody saying that you shouldn't do these things. And so, again, these two guys are going to work very closely together to try and get that Voting Rights Act and that Civil Rights Act. They didn't agree all the time, but they at least respected each other to get some of that stuff taken care of. Okay, but again, think about that Johnson is going to be struggling with that Vietnam War. So we have a picture here, right? When people were telling him to use atomic bombs in Vietnam, and he told people, it's like, no, I'm not going to destroy the entire country just to win a war. So, not, some good decisions, some bad decisions, but again, trying his best, I suppose. He's also going to have a war on poverty. The idea that if we're the richest country in the world, why do we have people who are in poverty? Right, so we should try to fix that. And they're going to be passing Medicare and Medicaid, right? So these are health insurance programs that are for the poor and for the old, right? We still have those today, thank goodness, right? And what we see then later on in 2009 with the passage of the Affordable Care Act, which is also known as Obamacare, it's basically a small expansion of Medicaid, right? To again make it so then people have affordable health care. So again, that's kind of a expansion of part of the Great Society. So again, watch that video here, right? There's a lot of good stuff going on. Great Society is something that's actually really, really good. And it's, something we should always, be paying attention to. Okay, our next thing here is that Johnson, it takes over in the winter of 1963. However, the next year is an election year, right? So he only took over that last year of Kennedy's administration, and then he has to run for re-election. So the election of 1964 is a very unusual election. So Johnson's going to be running against this Republican guy named Barry Goldwater, right? Barry Goldwater had some very radical ideas about Vietnam. His idea was just blow up the entire country, right? Okay, use nuclear weapons to end the war. So very radical in a way. And so this idea is going to be used in one of the most famous, actually, it's not one of the most famous, it is the most famous commercial for a political campaign, and it's called the Daisy Girl ad, right? So definitely take a pause real quick, all right? Okay, you're going to see Daisy Girl ad stuff in your test for this unit, so definitely watch this one, right? So right click on the link below that's called the Daisy Girl ad. This ad is only on television one time and was as powerful enough to make it where all of the red here are all the people who voted for Democratic Lyndon Baines Johnson. Landslide, okay, because of this one 30-second ad. So definitely got to watch that, see what's going on. What is Johnson saying in there that people were like, whoa, we can't vote for this dude that wants to blow everything up. Okay, so definitely watch that guy. Right. A few things to kind of link to civil rights at the time, because these are happening politically, is that we're going to have a bunch of court cases happening in the 50s and 60s. Right. Now, with these court cases, they're all going to be done by the Warren Court. So whenever you have a name for the Supreme Court, it's whoever the Chief Justice is. So like right now, our Chief Justice is John Roberts, so it's the Robert Court. Right. So Chief Justice Earl Warren, he's in charge of the Warren Court. And so a couple of these things that we're going to talk about, you guys have heard before, right? Or you've heard of the decision, but you didn't know what the name of the court case was. So these are going to be somewhat familiar. And so we're going to do a real quick review, and you're going to see some video links that go along with this as well, right? So before we had Plessy v. Ferguson, right? So this is not part of the Warren Court, but it said separate but equal, and basically said you could have segregation. Segregation was okay, right? Well, then 1954, part of the Warren Court, Brown v. Board of Education, we have the integration of schools, basically saying segregation is not okay, right? So that's definitely a court case you guys already know about, right? But you always link those two cases together, right? The Little Rock Nine, right? They are going to be these 9 students that are going to go to Little Rock High School, and they're going to be escorted by the National Guard, right? Who is going to be militarized and put into power by Eisenhower, the president at the time, right? So again, these events you should be somewhat familiar with, right? But if you're not, that's why we're going over them, okay? Right. Some other things we have happening during the Warren Court are going to be dealing with civil rights, or civil rights and civil liberties, right? And one of them is the Miranda v. Arizona case, right? So the Miranda case, you might not have heard of the Miranda v. Arizona case, but you've heard of your Miranda rights, okay? Those are the rights that are told to you when you get arrested. So over here to the side, we have a quick little thing of what all your Miranda rights are. That is what the police are supposed to read to you, right? And the first part that we all know is you have the right to remain silent. Okay, those are your Miranda rights, okay? And they come about from this court case. And basically what happened is that this guy gets arrested. He didn't know what his rights were. He ends up being convicted for a crime. He was guilty of that crime, but the case is all about the idea that he didn't know what these rights were. Now, these rights that you have are just basically parts of your the Bill of Rights. So you have these all the time. It's just that people were not always reminded or told the rights that they had. They weren't aware of them. So this court case is basically saying everybody has to be reminded of these things, right? And these are rights that every citizen of the United States has, right? So we're going to have a couple YouTube videos on that are going to be down below. So take a quick pause and watch those ones. And then we have the Loving versus Virginia case, right? So Loving versus Virginia is for this couple here. They're called, their last name's Loving, right? So perfect name for this court case to help us remember what's going on. But they were married in DC, and then they moved over to Virginia. In Virginia, interracial marriage was illegal. Okay, right, and so since it was illegal, they were arrested, right, for being married and living in the same home, and so then they will take their court case to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court rules that interracial marriage is now legal in all 50 states. And that happens in 1967. So that's probably the most shocking thing about this, is that it's so late. 1967 is when interracial marriage was legal in all the states. Now, some states it was legal beforehand. Obviously in DC, right, that District of Columbia, it was legal because that's where they were married. But it wasn't legal in all states. Right, the video you have here, right, is going to be about that. So again, take a little quick break and go watch the video. Okay, right? Our last topics are going to be on this election of 1968, right? So Johnson has left office because he's served as much time as he can, right? And we're going to have this next election of 1968. Now, in 1968, the Democrats are going to be nominating or wanting to nominate John Kennedy's little brother, Robert Kennedy. Okay, right, and he's going to run for president. He's a anti-war candidate, so he's against the war in Vietnam. Okay, now before he is officially picked as the person running for president, he is going to be assassinated. Okay, he's assassinated in June of 1968. A few months before that was when Martin Luther King was also assassinated. So we have two major influential people in 1968, both here in this picture, right, are both going to be assassinated within a few months of each other. Right, now that's going to be really significant for people that are trying to change the way the United States looks. Right, people are working with civil rights, people are working to try to end this war, and their two leaders are just outright murdered. That's going to really change how people are thinking about things. Some people are going to get scared, some people are going to be angry. It's really going to change the way the United States looks. So 1960 is a big year. To kind of have another reference here is in 1968 when we had our Vietnam notes, right? That's when we also have the Tet Offensive, which is the turning point in Vietnam where we start seeing that we're losing. All of these things are happening within a few months of each other. So things are really chaotic in the country in 1968. So it's a big, big year, right? So moving back to this election here, right, is that the Democrats have their convention, right, where they're supposed to officially pick who is going to run for president for their party. Well, Robert Kennedy was their guy. He's not around anymore. So we're going to have a lot of people protesting outside of the convention saying they want an anti-war candidate to be picked to replace Kennedy, right? However, there's going to be a clash between police and those protesters, right, in Chicago, and that is going to turn into violence. So we'll see a little image here, all right, you're going to see a video here as well. So definitely look at that. Things go from like just peaceful protest to all out chaos really, really quickly, right? Well, a bunch of people are seeing that on TV, and a lot of these people are conservatives, right? These Republicans see this on TV, and they see that the Democrats, everyone's fighting. They say they're anti-war, but then they do all this violent stuff. It really, that convention riot really, really hurt the Democrats that particular year because everyone's watching it on TV. Now, since they are going to nominate this guy named Herbert Humphrey, you don't need to know who that is because nobody knows who that is, right? He does not win, right? Nixon is going to win because he had this experience prior as being vice president, right? And people are like, well, at least he has experience of what's going on. So Nixon will win in a landslide, and it's basically because of that assassination of Robert Kennedy, right? And so from this in the late 60s, we're going to see a rise of the conservative movement or the Republican Party. And so in the 70s and 80s, we will see mostly Republican presidents from this point. All right, so for about 2 decades, we're going to see this rise of this conservative movement. It's also going to be a rise of a conservative movement because of what's happening in the 60s and early 70s. Think of all the hippies, right? Okay, all of those hippies, people see them on TV, and a lot of people are like, well, that's not what my America looks like, and so they're going to go in the opposite direction, right? And that's where a lot of these conservative ideas are going to gain hold because people are like, well, I believe in these things, not in this new idea that some of these counterculture or hippie people are bringing to light, right? So definitely make sure when you are done here looking through our video that you go back and fill in a bunch of your definitions in your packet, and go ahead and start filling in stuff for those presidents, and so that you don't get behind on that information, right? So if you have questions, like always, send me a message. And hopefully all of this was making sense, and hopefully you are able to watch all of those videos that I have posted below, because again, if we were in class, we would be watching every single one of those, talking about them, seeing what's going on. So definitely take that time to look at those videos. All right? Okay, until next time, I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.